For 22-year-old Catherine, October was meant to be the start of something new. She had finally separated from her abusive husband and was working at PetSmart in Greenville, South Carolina, surrounded by the animals she adored. But on the afternoon of October 23, 2016, Catherine left work at 2:15 p.m. and disappeared. 3 days later, her body was discovered in an abandoned farmhouse basement. Almost immediately, her friends had one suspect in mind: her estranged husband, John Blauvelt, a once-respected Army recruiter who had fled into the night with his 17-year-old girlfriend. Catherine Biter, known to everyone as Katie, was born on August 8, 1994, in Mount, South Carolina. She grew up in a loving family with her brother Brandon and sister Brittany, known for her cheerful disposition and the warmth she brought to everyone around her. When she was 20, she met John Blauvelt at a restaurant next door to the Army recruiting office where he worked. He was 26, charismatic, and well-respected in the Simpsonville community. John Tufton Blauvelt worked as a U.S. Army recruiter, someone who appeared to embody the principles of service and sacrifice. In 2015, Katie decided to enlist in the Army herself, recruited by John. Their relationship began professionally but quickly turned romantic. She served for just 2 months before receiving a medical discharge due to spinal problems. By 2016, they were married. Katie moved into John's house, dreaming of starting a family and building a future together. But the dream house quickly turned into something else entirely. John began inviting underage teenagers to the house for parties. There was marijuana, alcohol, and harder drugs. One of the regular visitors was 17-year-old Hannah Thompson from Hillcrest High School, where John often worked as a recruiter. Katie wanted a home where she could raise children. Instead, she found herself living in what became known as a party house. As the months passed, she grew increasingly frustrated and told John the partying had to stop. Hannah Thompson was described by investigators as being 100% in love with John Blauvelt. Investigator Cheryl Schofield later said that Hannah was like John's puppy and would do anything he wanted. She also said that Hannah absolutely despised Katie. By early 2016, less than 3 months after their wedding, Katie had moved out of the house. Almost immediately, Hannah moved into John's bedroom. The situation was about to get much worse. On February 26, 2016, Hannah Thompson's father contacted police. He hadn't seen his daughter for 2 weeks and was concerned about her relationship with John Blauvelt, a man more than 10 years her senior. That same night, police arrived at John's house and found Hannah there. He was charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. That very same day, Katie Blauvelt filed a domestic violence report with police. She told them that a month earlier, John had threatened her with a gun, pointing it at her head during an argument. The charges were stacking up against the once-respected Army recruiter. The Army took swift action. John's career, which had defined him for years, was suddenly in ruins. The Department of the Army cut his pay and disciplined him, removing him from the recruiting duties that had been his life. John blamed Katie for his downfall. According to investigators, he told friends he intended to get revenge. In the months that followed, the house became even more of a haven for teenagers. Ollie Somerville, a close friend of Katie, who was 16 at the time, later testified that they were smoking weed all day, every day. She said there was also alcohol, acid, and cocaine available. This was all happening at the home of a U.S. Army recruiter. During this period, Somerville wrote a disturbing to-do list and placed it on the refrigerator. It read simply, "Get rid of Katie for good." By October 2016, Katie and John had separated officially. There was a restraining order in place, preventing contact between them. Her family said she seemed to be finding peace at last, but John Blauvelt's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. Investigators later discovered a series of disturbing Google searches made on his phone in the weeks leading up to Katie's murder. How to sharpen a knife, and what do I do when my wife dies? October 23, 2016, started like any other day for Katie Blauvelt. She went to work at PetSmart on Woodruff Road in Greenville, surrounded by the animals that brought her joy. At 2:15 p.m., she left work for the final time. She was supposed to meet friends that evening, but she never showed up. When her family couldn't reach her, they immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't like Katie, so they reported her missing. According to arrest warrants, Hannah Thompson drove John Blauvelt to Woodruff Road that afternoon and dropped him off near Katie's workplace. It would be one of several ways she helped facilitate what was about to happen. At 4:17 p.m. on October 24th, Katie used her mobile phone for the last time. She took a selfie from inside her car. She had no idea that her estranged husband was nearby waiting. At 5:03 p.m., John called Hannah Thompson. Just 1 minute later, at 5:04 p.m., he sent her a Snapchat message saying, "Check out your Snapchat." The contents of that Snapchat were deleted from John's phone, but investigators believe it contained evidence of what he had just done. The abandoned farmhouse in Simpsonville had stood empty for more than 20 years. It was a place where local children sometimes played, and Katie herself had been there as a child. On this October evening, it became the scene of unimaginable horror. John stabbed Katie, and evidence showed she fought back. DNA was later found under her fingernails, but she had no chance against her much larger attacker. John then dragged her body through a basement window and stuffed it into a rectangular concrete box in the center of the basement. But he wasn't finished. He then drove her car to a parking lot on White Horse Road and abandoned it there. Hannah Thompson followed him in another vehicle to provide his getaway. The police later had surveillance footage showing the exact moment Katie's car was left in that parking lot. For 2 days, Katie's family lived in terror, not knowing where she was or what had happened. Her mother, Patricia, said she was terrified that something was going to happen to her. The police immediately launched a search when she was reported missing. This was completely out of character for Katie. On October 26, 2016, past midnight, investigators Cheryl Schofield and Keith Mocraft were called to a scene that would haunt them forever. Wayne Rohr, a mutual friend of both Katie and John, had gone to the abandoned farmhouse to look for her. What he found in the basement defied belief. He said, "I went inside, looked around everywhere, and it looked like someone had been there. I checked the whole place, went downstairs, and found her." He called police less than a minute after making the discovery. Investigator Keith Mocraft described the scene. There was a rectangular concrete box in the center of the basement. "We found Katie's body inside that box. Katie was just 5 feet 1 inch tall, a tiny little thing, as her mother described her. The sight was so horrific that even experienced investigators were shaken. This was how Katie Blauvelt died, alone and terrified in an abandoned basement. Her mother, Patricia, was devastated. "I was totally empty inside," she said. She did not deserve to be murdered. When investigators arrived to give John Blauvelt the news of his wife's death, his reaction immediately raised red flags. He didn't ask the normal questions a grieving spouse would ask. He didn't say, "Where did you find her?" or "How did she die?" Instead, his first words were, "She flipped my life upside down." Keith Mocraft, who delivered the death notification, was struck by John's lack of surprise or normal grief responses. "Didn't seem to really care that she was gone, let alone had been murdered," said Captain Schofield. A week later, investigators interviewed John more formally. His behavior was even more disturbing. "I lost a friend," he told them. "Maybe not the best wife, but I lost a friend." When asked if he had gone to see her body at the funeral home, he said yes, but that he had taken Hannah with him. But police couldn't arrest someone based on suspicious behavior alone. They needed evidence. And while they began building their case, John Blauvelt made a decision that would define the next 6 years of this investigation. He ran. John took his red GMC Yukon and disappeared with 17-year-old Hannah Thompson. For investigators, this presented a terrifying possibility. If he was willing to kill his own wife, there was no telling what kind of danger Hannah Thompson was in by fleeing with him. On November 18, 2016, police finally had enough evidence to obtain an arrest warrant charging John Blauvelt with murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. But he was already long gone. The same day, Hannah was reported missing by her parents. The teenage girl who had helped facilitate Katie's murder was now on the run across America with an accused killer. While John Blauvelt was fleeing across the country, investigators in Simpsonville were meticulously building their case. The evidence they uncovered painted a picture of premeditated murder driven by revenge and rage. John's phone records revealed the disturbing Google searches he had made in the weeks before Katie's death. Beyond how to sharpen a knife and what do I do when my wife dies, he had also searched for when police can tap your phone. Between October 18th and November 1st, 2016, he made numerous searches for Katie in Simpsonville and Blauvelt Greenville, apparently monitoring news coverage of the case. Even more damaging were the text messages John sent to Hannah on the day of the murder. He sent her messages saying, "She's gone and I'm going through with that thing." These weren't the words of an innocent man. Investigators also found John's journal, and what was written inside was chilling. In one entry, he wrote, "Someday I hope you understand why I did it. The girl was evil to me." In another passage, he wrote simply, "I did it." Friends and acquaintances provided testimony about John's state of mind before the murder. Allison Somerville testified that John had asked her if she wanted to go to Charleston so he could kill his wife. He also told her that he was born to kill people, both good and bad. Most shocking of all, multiple witnesses testified that John had spoken about splitting Katie's $100,000 life insurance policy with anyone who helped him kill her. The hunt for John Blauvelt became one of the most extensive manhunts in South Carolina history. U.S. Marshal Will Cook became the point person in the search and described John as a cocky one who thought they were never going to find him. John and Hannah were last seen in Las Cruces, New Mexico, on November 15, 2016, traveling with a female passenger police believed was Hannah. From there, their trail went cold. The U.S. Marshals discovered that the fugitive pair had traveled through Alabama, Texas, and California. They were living as a homeless couple, constantly on the move, staying off the grid. John's military training in survival and combat tactics made him a particularly challenging fugitive to track. On December 12, 2016, Hannah Thompson was found safe in Eugene, Oregon. She had been abandoned by John and went to a family friend's home, calling her parents to say she wanted to come home. She and John had been homeless while in Oregon, and she had finally had enough of life on the run. But when questioned by investigators, Hannah lied about John's whereabouts. She claimed he had disappeared one morning and said she didn't know where he was. This was far from the truth, as investigators later discovered. In 2019, the case was featured on In Pursuit with John Walsh. Host John Walsh called Blauvelt a wolf in sheep's clothing, and the program brought national attention to the manhunt. Tips poured in from across the country, but John remained elusive. Katie's family never gave up hope. Led by her mother, Patricia, they launched a relentless Justice for Katie campaign on social media. With the help of activist Tracy Fant and the group Freedom Fighters Upstate South Carolina, they kept the case in the public eye. They held annual commemorations on the anniversary of Katie's death and worked tirelessly to ensure she wasn't forgotten. Their advocacy became a model for other families dealing with similar tragedies. The sustained pressure and community support they generated proved crucial in eventually bringing John to justice. In early 2022, the case took a dramatic turn when a dedicated U.S. Marshals cold and complex case investigative team took over the investigation. This specialized unit, working with investigators from multiple agencies, brought fresh eyes and new techniques to the 6-year-old manhunt. The breakthrough came when Hannah Thompson finally told the truth. Despite her earlier lies to investigators, she had maintained contact with John throughout his years as a fugitive. She eventually provided information that led investigators to Medford, Oregon, where John had been living under the alias Ben Clean. U.S. Marshal Chris Tamayo and his team began surveillance of a house in Medford. They followed a male subject who matched John's description. But after 6 years on the run, how could they be certain they had the right man? John has some unique tattoos, explained Marshal Will Cook. Most distinctive was a pirate tattoo that investigators had noted during John's initial police interviews in 2016. When they spotted this same tattoo on their suspect, they knew they had found their man. On July 20, 2022, at 4 p.m., U.S. Marshals and local police surrounded John Blauvelt. When they took him to the ground and asked if he was John Blauvelt, he was in pure shock. According to the arresting marshal, John told officers his name was Ben, maintaining his false identity even as he was being arrested. The woman John had been living with for the past 6 years was devastated to learn his true identity. She had known him only as Ben Clean and had no idea she was living with an accused murderer. "We've been together for like 6 years," she told investigators, crying and shaking. "This is like a nightmare." For Katie's mother, Patricia, the call telling her that John had been captured was life-changing. "I was over the moon, just freaking out. That was such a great day," she said. On October 12, 2022, 3 months after John's arrest, Hannah Thompson was also taken into custody. She was charged with 5 felony counts, including obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. The teenage girl who had once helped John escape justice would now become the prosecution's star witness against him. John Blauvelt's trial began on September 16, 2024, nearly 8 years after Katie's murder. The prosecution, led by Kinley A.B. and John Mears from the South Carolina Attorney General's office, presented overwhelming evidence against him. Hannah Thompson's testimony was devastating. She told the jury that John had told her he was going to kill Katie and that after they fled the state, he had described in detail how he had done it. "He told me that he killed her," she testified. She also testified that he had told her he threw Katie's phone into water at the abandoned house and that he had to cover up her blood with dirt. The defense, led by Paul Neely and Anna Walker, argued that the police had tunnel vision and focused on John from the beginning without considering other suspects. They pointed out that there was no definitive DNA match linking John to the crime scene and claimed that Hannah's testimony had changed over the years, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury heard about John's disturbing Google searches, his text messages to Hannah, and his journal entries confessing to the murder. They learned about his violent threats against Katie and his attempts to recruit others to help kill her for the insurance money. On September 20th, 2024, after deliberating for just over 5 hours, the jury returned their verdict: guilty on all charges. John Tufton Blauvelt was immediately sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Hannah Thompson's case took a controversial turn on August 21st, 2025. Despite facing 5 felony charges and the possibility of 55 years in prison, she pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and concealing a felony and was sentenced to just 3 years probation with no prison time. The lenient sentence outraged Katie's family. Patricia Piver called it a slap on the wrist and a punch in the gut to the family. Many believed that Hannah's cooperation as the prosecution's star witness had influenced the judge's decision, but the family felt that justice had not been fully served for the teenage girl's role in facilitating Katie's murder.